Letters from his close associates capture a strange night. Before the attack, Caesar isn't preparing his troops. He spends hours rewriting his will, changing his sole heir. On the night before his assassination, Caesar essentially signed his own death warrant. Imagine, Rome is already asleep. The city is darkening, and the most important man in the empire is ruining his life in just a few hours. He doesn't yet know that in the morning, his own will stab him in the back. But all the signs around him are already screaming about it. He has strange dreams. His wife, in a panic, begs him not to leave the house. The priests are making sacrifices, and one by one they see bad omens. Even his friends whisper, "Take a break, relax, don't go to the Senate." And here lies the paradox. Everyone around seems to sense trouble, except for Caesar himself. We're not just talking about the famous "and you, Brutus." It's not only about the conspiracy of the senators. What we're really interested in is the night, the final hours. What he did, what he decided, what he thought. How much can we really understand from the sources? Who came to see him? What did they tell him? What signs were there? And how did he react to them? Like Caesar, a man who had come out alive from wars countless times, suddenly blind to his own death. We'll explore the human side of history, not a bronze statue, but a living man in his 60s, tired, unwell, reassessing his strength, and believing he controls everything. Why does he go back on his decision not to join the Senate? Why does he listen to some and ignore others? Did he ever have that moment of doubt? What if I'm wrong? We'll take a look at what ancient writers have to say. We'll see where they ramp up the drama and where they might actually hit the truth. We'll separate the legends from the more or less real details. In the end, we won't just have a collection of tales about prophetic dreams and bad sacrifices. Instead, we'll piece together a nearly minute-by-minute reconstruction of Julius Caesar's last night, exploring the moments when he could have still survived and why he ultimately didn't. Caesar takes off his armor and undresses in front of the people who have already decided to kill him. It's late evening. Caesar's house on the Field of Mars. Inside, it's still noisy, with praetorians, his personal guard, moving around. Formally, Rome is a republic, but everyone knows this is the home of the master of the world. And this man makes a move that seems insane today. He lets the soldiers go. Not all at once, not dramatically. More like he's just wrapping up the day. You can go ahead and rest. Tomorrow will be a regular Senate meeting. A few dozen armed men ready to die for him fade into the darkness. They're used to standing between Caesar and any threat. But tonight, he's the one putting that shield aside. Ancient texts show us how it looks from the outside. Rome is buzzing with rumors of a conspiracy. Names are being whispered. Brutus, Cassius, a few others too loud to ignore. People had already come to Caesar with hints. Be careful. Don't go out without guards. He responds with a line that sounds like a gift to the conspirators. It's better to die right away than to live in fear. And now it's not just about words. He turns this stance into action. In the evening, when everyone expects him to surround himself with a wall of swords, he makes a different choice. The house gradually empties, and the praetorians disperse to their posts. Meanwhile, in the city, quiet meetings are taking place in the senators' homes. No shouting, no toasts, just brief comments. Tomorrow, at Pompey's Curia. It's important to figure out who stands by him. Not the legionnaires, not the veterans, not the loyal commanders. It's those who, by their status, have the right to be closest to him. Senators, the people he has both elevated and humiliated, those he forgave after the Civil War, those he rewarded with positions, money, and influence. That night, he bets on them instead of strength. The sources paint the same picture. Caesar increasingly lives like a monarch, but he keeps playing the Republican game. He needs the Senate to appear as an ally, not just a backdrop under the threat of swords. If he meets them surrounded by Praetorians, that's one signal. If he lets his guard down and opens up, that's a completely different message. He's showing trust. And in the eyes of some in the elite, that's no longer generosity, but weakness. The paradox is that during the war, he was a master of suspicion. In Gaul, he didn't tolerate even a hint of betrayal. There were guards, intelligence, double checks. In Rome, in his own home, he acts the opposite way. He believes the enemy is already broken. The civil war is won. The opposition is crushed. Those who survived supposedly owe him their lives. He sees debtors around him, not future assassins. Ancient authors offer different explanations for this gesture. Some speak of a disdain for danger. Others say he was tired of constant protection and suspicion. Some add a political angle, to show he's not a tyrant, that he isn't afraid to come to the Senate as an equal among equals. But the plain fact remains. On the night before his assassination, he personally does what any conspirator dreams of. He clears away those with swords. There's one more detail. The Praetorians were personally loyal to him. Senators were bound by tradition, ambition, and their clans. He knew the guards by name. He often viewed the senators as a mass to be worked with numbers, positions, lands, promises. And in this setup, he decides to lock himself in with them. Tomorrow, in the Curia, in a closed room, without his own power, only among theirs. The reconstruction of the night reveals a stark contrast. Outside, everything is calm. Inside, Rome is preparing the stage. The Curia of Pompeii has already been chosen as the location. A group of senators has agreed in advance on who will grab him by the toga, who will strike the first blow, and who will support if he tries to escape. There's one key detail needed for this. No one should be around to intervene with weapons and disrupt the plan. And Caesar himself is providing that condition. He's not just keeping his guard to a minimum. He's essentially telling everyone that the morning will be routine and nothing will happen. You can see it in his actions, in the calmness of his home, in the absence of emergency meetings with the military. His night isn't spent preparing for danger, but rather on paperwork, wills, and plans. The troops are out there, in their camps, not at his doorstep. Ancient authors often like to assign fate the role of a director. But in this story, it's different. There's no mystique here. A politician used to winning first disarms his enemies, and then, in a desire to appear gentle, disarms himself. When he releases the Praetorians, it's as if he's saying, "The war is over. We're civilized people again." The senators hear that same phrase in a completely different way. Tomorrow, he will solidify his power for good. And after that, it will be too late. So, when Caesar's house falls silent and the heavy footsteps of the guards fade in the corridors, another night unfolds outside the walls. There, they're sharpening their knives, discussing the final plan, and mentally fitting themselves into their roles in history. In the morning, they will enter not as the welcoming hosts of the Republic, but as executioners. The door between them is already nearly shut by his own hand from the inside. At the same time, the investigator is reviewing the night records by name. He looks at the sheet with the night names and realizes this is his map to Caesar's killers. The list seems dull. Just names, servants, soldiers, scribes, people from Caesar's household, a few horsemen, a couple of senators. But if you look at it not from a bureaucrat's perspective, but as if you're watching a live performance, everything changes. It's not just about someone being somewhere. It's a chain of movements around a person who will be killed tomorrow. The investigator starts with the basics. He takes the names that come up closer to midnight. These are the people who were around Caesar at the end of the day. He compares them with the interrogation records. There are already confessions from the conspirators, snippets of phrases, excuses. Each one is trying to distance themselves from the moment of decision. No one wants to be the first to say, "We need to kill." And then coincidences start to emerge. One of the senators interviewed claims he saw a certain rider at Caesar's house the day before. That name appears in the night log next to a note about a brief conversation. In the official record, that rider swears he had no knowledge of the conspiracy. But the timelines don't match. The timing doesn't add up. He couldn't have been where he says he was and also be mentioned in the record at Caesar's house. The investigator moves on. He takes the names of those who, according to the conspirators, supposedly didn't take part in the planning and only found out about everything in the morning. Yet, in the nighttime recording, these people are already seen with the key figures. One senator, who later claims he acted out of duty to the Republic, visits a close associate of Brutus that night. In the list, it's just 2 lines in a row. A brief visit. The interrogations reveal a completely different picture. Both insist they didn't see each other that evening. Here comes the main lie. They try to frame the conspiracy as a sudden outbreak, as if everything just happened out of fear of dictatorship. But the night names tell a different story. These connections show that people were meeting up beforehand, not with the soldiers, not with the tribunes, but with those who would be sitting next to Caesar in the Senate the next day. This is especially clear in the link between Caesar's house and the homes of Brutus and Cassius. In the records, they almost stage a tragedy. Debt, doubts, a painful choice. At night, everything feels simpler. The name of the courier, who usually runs errands, suddenly appears with both Cassius and Brutus, as well as on the list at Caesar's door. Brief visits, late at night. The timing is almost the same. This is no longer a coincidence. It's a coordinated route. The investigator sees these names as threads. Some lead to people who were really just background figures. The servant who delivered the documents, the scribe left long before sleep. They confirm their actions, and the list backs that up. They aren't lying because they have nothing to hide. Others start to get mixed up in time, changing details, talking in generalities instead of specifics. It's often those people who stand closest to those who will later stab a knife. The most dangerous place is where 3 layers overlap: the night list, the conspirators' protocols, and the stories of those who survived by chance. For example, one of Caesar's associates recalls hearing a restrained argument late at night through the wall. At that time, 2 senators are noted on the list, swearing they were already home. In the records, both carefully avoid this part of the night, talking about prayers, family, and doubts. But the dry entry at the entrance shatters this pretty version. This is how the structure of the conspiracy reveals itself in small details. It's not a romantic circle of noble saviors of the Republic, but a web of personal connections. Family ties, old grudges, the fear of losing power. Some come to Brutus as a relative. Others approach Cassius as someone who knows how to pressure and persuade. Yet by morning, those same people will stand beside him, as if fate had just brought them together. The names whispered at night reveal another important detail. That evening, hardly anyone who would later become Caesar's defenders, albeit unsuccessfully, visits him. People who were truly loyal to him remain on the sidelines. In the reports, They recall the orders they received for the next day, the tasks assigned to them. But they're not on the list by his door. There's no living shield between him and the conspirators at night. Just paper, plans, and the rustling of scrolls. For the investigator, this is a crucial turning point. A picture begins to emerge from the scattered confessions. Caesar locks himself in with the Senate elite, believing he's in control of the process. The Senate elite is already holding secret meetings at night, avoiding his home. In their records, they try until the last moment to frame this as a reaction to his actions. But the lines drawn around names and times stubbornly tell a different story. When he connects the dots, the truth becomes clear. The night before the murder isn't a shadow of fate over Rome. It's a working shift of the conspiracy. People are moving between homes, coordinating roles, setting up tomorrow's theater. And right in the center of this circle sits a man who believes he's still in control of the game. Meanwhile, in the office, they're working on the wording of the future will. At some point during this night, Rome already knew who its next master would be, while Caesar himself did not. The office in his house is awake. There are no loud voices, no grand gestures, just the quiet scratching of styluses on wax. Scrolls, drafts, and unfamiliar handwriting are spread out on the table. This isn't a grand ceremony or the end of an extraordinary life. It's just a routine editing of a document. But right here, in this dull, almost accountant-like silence, something happens that will later be called fate. The secretary receives an instruction. The wording needs to be clarified. It's not just about distributing property or handing out money to the people and friends. The will includes a firm, straightforward line. I appoint Gaius Octavius as the heir. Not Brutus, not someone from the old guard, not a person the Senate is used to seeing around. A kid by the standards of the Roman elite. A relative, sure, but not a player in their game. For the official story, it makes sense. There's an adopted son, a family line, a neat explanation. Caesar was grooming a successor. But if you break down the night hour by hour, everything starts to creak. The conspirators are moving between each other. The Senate elite is dividing up tomorrow. Meanwhile, in his house, a document is being rewritten that takes the grand prize out of their hands. The traditional version simply states that a will is the dictator's final word, his wishes laid out in advance. But the secretary's notes and testimonies after the murder paint a different picture. The phrasing about Octavius hasn't been lingering in the text for ages. It shows up closer to the end, like a clear, fresh addition. Not a vague phrase like "some of my relatives," but a specific name, just like when Caesar, sensing the tension around him, discreetly moves aside someone who isn't favored by any of the old political factions. The secretary will later mention this almost in passing, as if it were just a technical detail. There was a document, they made some edits, clarified things, and Caesar signed it. But for the investigator, this is no minor technicality. This is a knife plunged into the heart of the old aristocracy. Everything they discuss among themselves at night revolves around one thing. What comes next? How to regain their influence? How to share power? They think within their old circle, among their families, their names, their debts. And suddenly, Octavius appears in the will, a man who owes nothing to any of them. In the conspirators' records, they try to gloss over this topic. They talk about tyranny, about the republic, about the fear of a new king. They play with lofty words, digging into their memories for anything that can justify bloodshed. But here's the plain truth. On the very night they're whispering in each other's homes, Caesar is signing a document that hands over future power not to them and not through them, He's bypassing their entire circle. Looking back at it, the line becomes almost straight. The conspiracy isn't just about hatred for his rule, it's about the fear of what comes next. It's one thing to endure a living Caesar, someone you can negotiate with, pressure, and form alliances around. It's a whole different story to wake up in Rome, where a legally recognized heir, young and ambitious, with his name and his money, gets to decide who can thrive politically and who must vanish. The signature on the will shatters the convenient myth of a sudden surge of civic virtue. It shows that Caesar wasn't clinging to power until his last breath. He was already building a legacy for himself. Not a senatorial or collective one, but a personal one. An heir, money, name, authority, all flowing in one direction. In this scheme, there's no honorable place for Brutus, Cassius, and the others. At best, they play the role of seniors, respected only as long as it's beneficial. The official narrative pretends these things exist separately. Here's the plot of the Republicans and the dictator's will, two parallel stories. But the timing disrupts this picture. The night when they discuss the murder, and the night when they confirm the heir, it's the same night. One city, the same corridors of power, the same tension in the air. Just on one side of the wall, people are sharing tomorrow morning, while on the other side, Caesar is signing a document that erases them from the future. And then, the scene in the Senate stops being a tragedy about freedom. It turns into a reaction to the paper signed just a few hours earlier. A delayed, anxious, and bloody reaction. They are not just killing the dictator, they are trying to kill his future. But at the moment when the secretary carefully writes down, "I appoint Gaius Octavius as the heir," that attempt is already doomed. The paper has managed to outpace the knives. After the signature, the secretary leaves, and only the guards remain in the hall. Caesar looks at the armed men by the door and calmly tells them to leave. This sounds strange to the guards. Rumors are spreading in Rome that something is brewing against him. There's a tension in the city, like before a storm. But he sits at the table, a lamp burning beside him, his voice steady and tired. He isn't asking. He's commanding. The guards step into the hallway. The door closes, and the room immediately grows quieter. Only the rustle of scrolls, the crackle of the wick, and his breathing remain. In front of him lies a will, a piece of paper that makes murder less effective. He understands this. He also realizes something else. The circle whispering against him can no longer be stopped. They've gone too far. They fear not just his influence today. They fear his posthumous hand reaching out from these lines. He leans back in his chair and begins to name names, almost emotionlessly. Not out loud for anyone else, but as if to himself, checking them from memory. Brutus, Cassius, Decimus, Trebonius, Cinna, one name after another. This isn't guesswork. He's been in this system for too long not to know who can cross the line. Each of them has a motive, a wound, a grievance, a fear. These people were just sitting at the same table with him not long ago. They asked for positions, land, influence. He gave it to them, but the more he gave, the more they felt dependent on his will. They were used to the freedom of the old Roman nobility, where everything is decided in a small circle, through agreements and mutual favors. He was breaking that circle. He lists them one by one, like he's going through a list of creditors. Brutus, who lives caught between his duty to the Republic and his loyalty to his benefactor. Cassius, who feels humiliated for being passed over for appointments. Decimus, who has been given too much responsibility and fears losing it all one day. Each of them has their own personal Rubicon deep down, and they've already crossed it. Caesar knows that the conspiracy against him isn't some secret reserved for the gods. In Rome, there are no truly closed doors. A servant handing over a cloak. A client standing in the shadow of a column. A curtain slightly parted by chance. Information flows to him slowly, but surely. Not precise plans, but a general picture. He doesn't know the hour or the place, but he sees who can raise a hand. He doesn't call the Praetorians. He doesn't order the arrest of suspects. He doesn't hold a night court. Instead, he secures tomorrow on paper and sets aside his shield. It almost feels like a challenge. If you're going to go all the way, do it openly. No scenes with a scared dictator hiding behind his soldiers. At this point, he's no longer playing the role of the eternal ruler. He's thinking about a legacy that will outlast him, an heir he's naming, the money he's directing to the people, gifts for the soldiers so the army remembers who they owe. He's building future loyalty that can't be buried under a statue of Pompey. He repeats the names again, maybe out loud, maybe just mouthing them. Brutus, Cassius, Decimus. And he realizes that if he raises the alarm now and disrupts their plan, it will only be postponed. Tomorrow there will be a new conspiracy. In a month, another one. As long as the question of inheritance hangs in the air, the game goes on. With the will, the game is almost over. It's a strange balance. He accepts that they might kill him, but he won't let them destroy the system he's building. The will is already prepared. The witnesses have seen him sign it. The rumors will spread faster than his blood can cool on the marble. He's not betting on today, but on the memory of this night. The guards outside shift from foot to foot. For them, it's just another routine duty, another late evening by the dictator's bedroom. And behind the wall, the man feared by all of political Rome calmly crosses their superiors off the list of the future. Not with a direct order, but with a quiet directive. Who will take over after him? By the time he finishes, the room smells of smoke from the nearly burned-out oil. He signals, and the secretary comes back in. A quick text check, a few edits, a firm signature. Then he dismisses him too. Only the walls, the dim light, and his own shadow on the floor remain. He could call the guards back, command them to sleep at the threshold, to station people at every entrance. But he doesn't do that. He gets up and slowly walks around the room, as if trying on tomorrow, a day he might not see. And in that moment, it becomes clear. His real protection isn't in the hallway, but in the scroll that's already hidden away in a safe place. He leaves the night as it is, quiet on the outside and tense to the max on the inside. He has a list of names in his head, a will behind him, and the city that will wake up different in the morning, no matter if those he just named will make it there. Almost immediately after that, he orders the scribe to come in. He's not writing about death, but about who will take charge of it after him. The scribe enters almost silently, like someone stepping not into a room, but into someone else's fate. The oil in the lamp is running low. The light flickers, and shadows stretch across the walls like long fingers. You can hardly see the faces, and it doesn't really matter. What matters to Caesar are not the eyes, but the ears and the hand that will write everything down before the night is over. He doesn't say the word will. He doesn't say, "I will be killed soon." He simply starts listing names, calmly, in a steady tone, as if he's preparing a list for another meeting. Some he names sharply and briefly, as if cutting them off. Others he repeats more slowly, savoring them like a fine wine. These names will outlive him. Through them, power will flow. The scribe writes without looking up. For him, this might just be another scroll, another text among hundreds. But right now, Caesar is doing something in Rome that matters more than any guard at the door. He's sketching out tomorrow's map of power. Not just who will get the house, the gardens, the statues, but who will have the right to say, "This is what Caesar wanted," when Caesar himself is no longer around. He's naming those who won't hold on to power, and those who hold on. Those who can stand on three pillars: the people, the army, and the Senate. He has been through too many campaigns and seen too many coups to believe in friendship. He cares about only one thing: who won't break the system he has been carrying since the days of Gaul, since the first victories and the first triumphant entries into the city. He knows these people better than they know themselves. Who burns with a thirst for glory? Who counts every coin? Some will seek revenge for years. Some will swallow their pride for a high position. In his mind, it's not a list of friends, but pieces on a chessboard. If he's gone, who will make the first move? Who will stand there pretending nothing happened? Who will flip the board and start breaking everything around? Each name falls into silence, like a hammer striking metal. He lifts some higher than they deserve, while others he seems to deliberately push aside, leaving them in the shadows. One gets the honor of a title. Another gets the chance to act. The third only has the appearance of participation. Even now, in the dead of night, he continues his old craft: divide and conquer. But this time, it's not with armies, but with a posthumous order. He remembers the conspiracy, yet he doesn't give it the honor of being spoken aloud. He doesn't name those who are already sharpening their daggers. He doesn't write their names on the scroll. Instead, he makes a move that will outlast both them and himself. It establishes by law what they plan to resolve with a knife: the official order against secret strikes under Pompey's statute. His will include money for ordinary people, festivals, distributions, games. All of this will spread through the city faster than rumors of his death. People will learn that the man they were portrayed as a harsh ruler left them a part of his wealth. And at that moment, anyone who raised a hand against him will suddenly turn from a liberator into the murderer of someone who cared for them. This is why this text is being dictated now, not for the sake of pretty phrases, but for future attachment. He understands that if there are dances and laughter in the streets after his death, the conspirators have won. But if the city greets the news with tears and gratitude, they will lose even in their moment of triumph. The scribe sometimes doesn't catch everything and asks for clarification. Caesar calmly repeats himself, softening his words here and there to avoid causing unnecessary pain. Somewhere, he makes them tougher to avoid any ambiguity. There's a strategy behind every phrase. He can't control tomorrow morning, but he can influence how Rome will interpret what happens then. When it comes to key figures, the pace slows down. He runs through it in his mind again. Who can be trusted with part of the power, but not all of it? Who to place in the spotlight, yet keep without real leverage? Who to give a modest title, but with plenty of freedom to act? He breaks down influence just like he used to break down enemy armies. He never gives everything away at once. Outside, it's a warm night, a tired city, with only a few footsteps on the pavement. Inside, a man who might not make it to dawn calmly lays out a blueprint for a world without him. He will be removed from the center, but the path that power will take after him has already been drawn. At some point, he falls silent. A heavy pause hangs in the room. He goes over the chain in his mind once more. From the scroll to the people. from the people to those whose names just echoed in the darkness, and from them to the future of Rome. If everything goes as he planned, their conspiracy will be nothing more than a bloody footnote in the history he has already rewritten to suit himself. He nods. The scribe clears his throat and begins to read aloud what he just wrote. His voice is dry, a bit weary, but steady. And within these words are hidden the careers of others, future consuls, new holidays, new idols, new exiles. The years after Caesar's death, when his voice will still be heard. Caesar listens intently, not distracted by any rustle or his own fatigue. He corrects a few spots, adds one name, erases another, denying it a claim to the future. Somewhere he removes an unnecessary title to avoid fostering unnecessary ambition. Now he's no longer a ruler giving orders. He's the editor of his own posthumous fame and the future of the state. When he finally signals that it's enough, it's not so much physical weakness that he feels, but an inner emptiness. The work is done. The scribe steps out, clutching the scroll that will become a thunderclap over the city tomorrow. In the corridor, everything remains the same. The guards, the dim light, just another night. But in his hands, a new card of power is already clenched. The door closes. The room is dark again, with only a small flame in the lamp still clinging to the wick. Caesar is left alone, knowing he has accomplished the most important thing. If tomorrow his body falls at the foot of Pompey's statue, Rome will not bow to the killers, but to those whose names he has just inscribed in ink on a thin strip of papyrus. Soon, a record of this list will appear in the archives. The official version doesn't lie in the details, but in the main point. Caesar didn't just write a will, he was changing the power structure. And that's documented in papers that no one likes to talk about. There's a dry, boring thing for historians, but it's deadly for legends. An archive. What scribes, lawyers, and document keepers later carefully described. They weren't thinking about drama. They recorded exactly what was written, who got what, and who suddenly rose to the top out of nowhere. These documents reveal something that disrupts the usual story of the poor, naive dictator caught off guard. This is a will, drawn up according to all Roman rules. It's not a myth or something made up later. It's a specific text, verified and rewritten, with references to witnesses and formulas that couldn't just be faked in Rome. The first thing that stands out in this text is that it's not about property. It's about power. Sure, it lists gardens, houses, and money, but the real point isn't in the amounts. The key is who he gives it to and what it means. He leaves money for the people, for every citizen. This isn't charity, it's a political move. When he dies, the crowd should feel that this man thought of you until the very end. It's recorded. Later, it gets read out loud at the forum, and the city erupts. It wasn't conspirators controlling the mood of the streets. It was the dead Caesar. Things are about to get even tougher. The text mentions Octavian, a young heir who is almost unknown. He's legally recognized, not a friend or a close ally, but the grandson of Caesar's sister, to whom he passes on the most important things: his name, his status, and his wealth of symbols. The archive makes it clear. Caesar didn't bet on those old wolves sitting next to him in the Senate. This isn't just a fantasy of later generations. The will is dated, and there are official notes. There are mentions of people who assured him. There's a chain, where it was stored, who had access to it, when it was taken out and announced. All this boring bureaucracy works like concrete. It holds the structure of the fact. It creates a strange picture. At night, he crosses some out and elevates others. He removes certain relatives and gives a chance to another. not because he loves them, but because he's building a new configuration for the future. The archival text shows that he was thinking about the transfer of power. He was thinking about who would gain influence instead of just a seat. Who would people trust when he was gone? The conspirators in this scheme don't come off as the puppet masters of history. They seem like people who just didn't realize the game had already moved on. While they were sharpening their daggers, Caesar was signing a document that wiped out their biggest victory. They could kill the body, but legally, politically, and emotionally, he had already redirected the flow. The official version paints him as carefree, tired, and confidently dull. But the text in the archives reveals a different person. Sober, cold, and very specific. He understands that the night could be his last. Instead of hiding, he sets in motion a mechanism that will work without him. One undeniable fact. When the will was read, Rome buzzed not with the names of the killers, but with the name of the heir. There are records about this. There's the crowd's reaction described by those who lived through it. There are the consequences that would later lead to new wars and a new power. And here's the main contradiction. History loves to tell the story of the tragedy of a genius caught off guard. The archival will says otherwise. He wasn't safe. He felt it. And he wasn't going to hand over Rome to those who had sharpened their knives. The night before the conspiracy, Caesar had essentially already taken the main prize from their hands. And on a thin scroll of papyrus, he left them just one spot in the future. A bloody footnote to someone else's plan. Meanwhile, another archive records a nearly identical detail. In a different document, in another dusty folder, a scene from the same night emerges that is almost the same. This is no longer a will. It's a record of a visit, a formal document, but behind it lies a simple human situation. Caesar is meeting people late at night. Not a feast, not a celebration, not love stories. A working meeting. Names are mentioned. The time is set. The place is established. This isn't a legend or a retelling. It's recorded by a scribe who doesn't care about the drama of history. One person stands out on the list. Gaius Octavius, the very one who will later be known to the world as Augustus. At this moment, he's still a nobody, a pale relative, a frail young man. Later, people will say he was underestimated, but in this document, he's already standing next to Caesar, part of the inner circle allowed in at night when the city is asleep. The foundation, where the document is kept, describes a standard procedure. They noted who came in and who went out, who accompanied whom and who was on duty. Just the usual security routine. But it's this routine that shows the night wasn't empty. This isn't just an old man tossing and turning in bed waiting for fate. This is a person who moves the pieces until the very end. The records indicate that the meeting wasn't brief. The arrival and departure times don't match up with typical small talk. This isn't just a quick 5-minute hello, it's a conversation that goes on. And what's important is that there were fewer people than at a usual gathering. The circle is tighter. This isn't just a crowd. It's the setup of a mechanism. In another folder, there's indirect confirmation. A report on the preparations for the games that Caesar was planning to hold. Suddenly, the name Octavius pops up with a note about future expenses. It seems like a small detail, but when you piece the sheets together, a story starts to emerge. Money, a name in a will, a late-night visit. Everything is aligned. The preparation for the show involves not just the titles, but also the impact on the crowd. The conspirators themselves are barely noticeable in these documents. Their names do appear in the lists of senators, in the records. But on this night, they blend into the crowd. No special visits, no private late-night conversations, No marks next to their names. They are on the outskirts of his last recorded actions. The archive works against the beautiful myth. There was no picture where Caesar fully believes in friendship and isn't expecting a blow. The documents reveal a figure who has already outmaneuvered many. He invests not in those sitting next to him in the Senate, but in those he's preparing for the future. It's a reboot of what's to come. There's also another dry but important detail. A note about handing over the keys to the storage of personal papers. Nighttime. A change of the responsible person. Signatures of witnesses. It's officially explained as convenience. But in reality, we see that he's changing the person who controls access to his documents. The timing of this move aligns with the date of the will and those late-night visits. This is no longer a coincidence. It's a system. When you put all of this together, the image of a carefree dictator who relaxed and waited for tomorrow's meeting disappears. We're looking at someone who understands that he could be removed, and he's doing everything to ensure that after his death, they won't be the ones controlling the narrative. It's not those who are ready to stab in the back, but those he places at the center of the scheme. The archival notes don't shout, but that's what makes them so chillingly convincing. No drama, no morals, just numbers, signatures, names. And in those figures and scribbles, you can see Rome still thinks it lives under Caesar, while he's already shifting the levers to other people. It paints a harsh picture. While the conspirators believe they'll change everything tomorrow, he's making moves tonight that will outlast both them and his own death. Documents reveal that the real struggle for power isn't happening under the columns of the Senate, but rather at a table, lit by a lamp, over scrolls that will determine not his fate, but that of their future. A little later, in another case, a similar phrase will come up. In one archival document, next to Caesar's name, there's a brief note, personally present at night. It's this personally that holds half the truth about his last night. Because of his status, he didn't have to listen to anyone or sign anything himself. But in the documents, time and again, the same thing comes up. He doesn't just give orders, he shows up, checks things, and approves them. There's a record of the will, a dry line, devoid of emotion. Night, the priest's house, witnesses, the formula that always gets repeated in such cases. But at the end, there's one extra detail, a note about additional instructions for distributing the property and the benefit of the people. This isn't just decoration. It's a legal hook that turns a will from a simple family document into a political tool. And this isn't just hearsay. It's all laid out in an actual document that was later read aloud to a crowd. In another case, from the same period, a list of payments to veterans comes to light. The date is almost the same. It was a night of urgent adjustments to amounts and the addition of names. The wording is identical. By the will of the dictator, personally approved by him. He doesn't go through intermediaries or assistants. He dives right into the details, figuring out who gets what and how much. This isn't just an act of generosity, it's a way to buy loyalty for when he's no longer around. There's also a report on temple expenses. Suddenly, there's a line about preparations for games and giveaways that are set to happen after the scheduled Senate meeting. The money is already allocated, the people in charge are appointed, and the signatures are in place. So, on paper, he's planning Rome's future beyond the point where they intend to stop him. This isn't naivety. It's a bet that his decisions will hold up even in his absence. The toughest part is the timing. The will, late-night visits, changing the custodian of personal documents, adjusting the payment lists, different matters, different archives, different reasons. Yet they all converge on the same days. It doesn't seem chaotic. It seems like a carefully planned scheme. Money, documents, people, access to information. There's also the story about the keys to his archive. One report clearly states, the old person in charge has been relieved. A new one has been appointed, and the keys were handed over in front of witnesses. No explanations about why it's happening now. The official wording about convenience feels too polished. However, there are familiar names of those who will later read his wishes to the public. So, he gives them access in advance to what will become a weapon after his death. The archival documents don't know what a dramatic moment is, but you can see how Caesar gradually pushes the old aristocracy away from power. In the lists of new appointees, more and more people appear who owe their careers and wealth to him. Young, dependent, not rooted in the old clans. That night, he doesn't talk to the conspirators or try to change their minds. He just makes sure that others handle the decisions after him. If you only look at the stories from ancient writers, you might picture a trusting ruler walking into the Senate like it's just another meeting. But when you dig into the real documents, it's clear he lived as if every day could be his last. And he didn't use that to hide. He used it to secure his influence for the future. In one of the cases, a familiar phrase about the benefit of the people and the peace of the state will appear later on. It almost repeats word for word what's in his nighttime orders. This means that the style, the words, even the phrases he put into the documents outlived him and became a template for those who came after. It creates a strange picture. On the surface, Rome is getting ready for a regular day. The Senate is preparing for a meeting, and the conspirators are waiting for their moment. But down in the documents, another scenario is already laid out. In this version, Caesar isn't a victim or a naive dictator. He's a man who, that night, rewrites the rules of the game so that his death becomes just a moment, not an ending. At the same time, another confirmed episode emerges in the accompanying materials. The official story is cracking at a point that hardly ever gets mentioned. There's a dry record, stripped of emotion and embellishments. Just before the conspiracy, Caesar changes the people who control his documents. The old archive keeper is being replaced, the new one is being introduced, and the keys are handed over in front of witnesses. Everything is done neatly, just like a regular procedure. But the timing makes it feel anything but routine. The wording sounds decent, as if it's about some convenience and order. Yet, in the same document, the names of those who will soon read out its orders to the people flash by. The same people, the same signatures. This isn't a coincidence. It looks like he's intentionally giving them access to what will become a political weapon right after he's gone. The archive doesn't do drama. There are no monologues, no beautiful scenes. It's just a timeline. And in that timeline, you can see how, step by step, he's pushing the old guard out of the levers of power. Appointments, notes, confirmations of authority. Everything is heading in one direction. Key positions are filled by people who owe him everything, with money, status, and the simple fact that their name now carries weight. They are young, unbound by old families and clans. They have no real influence without his signature on the documents, and it's to them that he leaves access to what will outlive his body. The texts, decisions, promises already set in stone. If you only listen to the ancient authors, a convenient picture emerges. A kind, self-assured ruler. The night before the meeting, he claims he isn't expecting a blow, doesn't change his habits, and heads to the Senate just like always. But the papers tell a different story. They reveal that he lives like someone who always has one thought in mind. Tomorrow, I might not be here. And he's not using this to hide his gold in a safe place. He's assessing the influence. He's tightening up the weak links. He's shifting access to information into the hands of those who will remain loyal to him, even when he can no longer sign anything. In one of the later cases, a familiar phrase comes up. It states that the decision was made for the benefit of the people and the peace of the state. The same words, almost in the same phrasing, appear in his nighttime orders. This isn't just a coincidence in style. His vocabulary, his political language, become the standard for those who will take over later. It creates a strange picture. On the outside, Rome seems to be functioning as usual. The Senate is waiting for the meeting to start. The conspirators are assigning roles. Guards, servants, and the crowd, everything is going according to the usual script. There are no official signs of a storm brewing. But down below, in the papers, another reality is unfolding. There, Caesar is already reshaping the future. He isn't talking to his enemies. He isn't writing them letters. He isn't trying to plead with anyone or outsmart them in the open. He's working with what will definitely remain after any knife strike, with documents, with the law, with access to the archives. There, he's not a victim. He's a person who, on the last night, resets the old rules and lays down new ones. And here's another confirmed episode that makes this picture even tougher. In the same set of documents, there's another matching testimony. Hidden in one of the dry lines of the Roman archive is something that shatters the usual image of Caesar's last night. There's a document that was long considered almost routine, a typical order for access to government records. But several details lined up at once: the time, the names, the wording. This isn't just a legend or a retelling, it's something tangible. A text written during his lifetime, confirmed by those who copied and preserved it. What we see is this. Just a few hours before the meeting from which he won't return alive, Caesar silently changes the rules of the game around him. He doesn't seek advice. He doesn't call on the old senators. He doesn't look for support from those used to speaking for the Republic. Instead, he signs an order that opens doors for young people to places they couldn't enter before, the heart of Roman bureaucracy. The list of names doesn't include any prominent families. There are no longtime senators. These are people who owe him everything: their careers, their money, the very right to be involved in public affairs. He hands them the keys to something that was more important in Rome than any sword or speech in the Forum: the records. The document clearly outlines which scrolls they have access to. These include court rulings, financial reports, debtor lists, and a record of those to whom the state owes something. There's also one more crucial point: drafts of laws that haven't been brought up for discussion yet, but are already prepared by his team. This means that even if he's gone tomorrow, these people will know what was in the works, what steps were planned, who was promised something, and who was turned down. They will be able to follow the line not through rumors or retellings, but through his own texts. His signature is under the order. The formula at the end is the same as in his other later documents: for the benefit of the people and the peace of the state. This isn't just a pretty slogan on a column. It's a stamp that gets repeated from document to document. And it was this stamp that the archivists later used to find the connection between different scrolls scattered over the years. Things get more interesting. In another case, one that came after death, where they discuss who has the right to refer to Caesar's decisions, a mention of that nighttime order suddenly comes up. It clearly states that certain individuals were granted legal access to the documents by the dictator's will. So, this isn't a late forgery. This means the order actually became part of legal practice. The picture turns out to be devoid of romance. No mysticism, no prophecies. Just a person who understands that his body is vulnerable. But his paperwork is not. He can be stabbed on the steps of the courthouse, but his signature on a document cannot be erased. It will live on in records, references, judges' decisions, and future disputes, and he takes full advantage of that until the end. While the conspirators divide roles and lines among themselves, he shares the right to information with his people. While they prepare their knives, he prepares them a problem. Even if they kill him, they won't destroy the order in his paperwork. The toughest part of this episode isn't even that he's doing all this on the last night. It's that he shows no extra emotion at all. There's not a hint of fear or a shadow of panic. Just phrases he's used before. The same expressions, the same political language. As if this isn't a final move, but just another day at the office. The archives show that at that moment, Caesar is already living on two levels. On the surface, he's a calm ruler who supposedly isn't expecting death. At the bottom, in the texts, there's a person who rearranges the pieces so that after his fall, the field remains his. And the confirmed document with the nighttime date is the very nail that holds the entire structure together. It's not a legend, not a guess, but a recorded fact. Then, in another case, another line pops up that makes everything even tougher. It lists those who used this nighttime order after his murder, and among the names are people who officially didn't align with him afterward, but they lived and made decisions based on his paper. At the same time, in related matters, they are noting another verified episode. The most unpleasant part of this story is that we have not a legend, but a cold, hard piece of paper with a nighttime date.